Welcome everybody to part one of this DevRec webinar series entitled Tech Recruitment Unveiled, Secrets to Successful HR and IT Cooperation. Before we get started, I've got a couple of quick housekeeping things to go through. First one is, please send in your questions. We will be saving time for a Q&A session at the end of today's discussion. So if you've got any questions for our panelists, we encourage you to leave them in either the chat box below or the Q&A. It doesn't matter. We'll do our best to get to all of them at the end of the discussion. Second of all, this webinar is being recorded. So if you can't make it to the end of the discussion, or if you want to share it with one of your colleagues, we'll be sending you that recording link probably early next week. So keep an eye out in your inbox for that. And last but not least, we will be sending you guys a post-webinar survey. So if you'd like to leave some feedback, we really encourage you guys to do that. Let us know how we went today. There's also some questions there about maybe future content you'd like to see us cover down the road. So we really encourage you guys to leave that feedback. It'll take about 2 minutes. Okay. I think what we could do now is introduce today's panelists who've been sitting patiently for me to get to them. So I might start with Marsh. Thanks very much, Marsh, for joining us. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
I've been doing tech recruiting since 2006, so it's about 16 years. Right now, I'm a senior technical recruiter at Ocean. So if anybody's interested in a job with Ocean, we are hiring nationally here in the United States. So we are 100% remote. You can contact me directly at m7@ocean.com. I'm also highly involved in the start tech community as well here in Boston. I run Angel Hack Boston. I'm also a member of the Boston New Technology Group, which has over 55,000 members.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I think we'll go left to right. So maybe Trent, can you introduce yourself and give us a few words about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Trent Cotton, currently the Senior Director of Talent Acquisition and Retention at Hatchworks. I've been in recruiting for 19. I don't like to think about it. I've been in recruiting for a while. I've been in the tech recruiting space since probably about in and out since 2008, 2009. Prior to converting to the dark side and getting in HR, I was actually a hiring manager as a commercial banker, private banker, and all of that. And got into recruiting because I hated working with my recruiters and figured out that it could be done better. Little did I know that it was actually a really, really hard job. So really interested in our topic today.
As am I. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Ludmila. If anyone joined our data science recruitment panel earlier this year, you might remember Ludmila. So thanks again for joining us. Can you give our audience a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, and thank you for inviting me again. First of all, I'm really thrilled to be a part of such a great crowd. I'm a tech recruiter for about 6 years. So comparing to my company here today on our webinar, I'm more junior, senior talent acquisition partner. I'm working currently in the Ivan. We're working as a cloud technologies, and we're also growing our open source office. So I'm specializing mostly with tech recruitment and whatever falls into the tech design and product sides. And now closely also working with an open source and communities, technologies, talks, webinars, all in.
All in. Sounds good. All right.
And Marsh, I'm almost positive she called us old.
I called you wise and experienced.
Yeah, it's the accent. It sounded so elegant.
Chose her words wisely, I think. Okay, so we do have a lot to get through today, but some of you might be thinking, what is this concept of DevRec? So I thought I'd just say a few words about the concept, about this webinar series before we get stuck into our discussion today. So yes, what is DevRec all about? DevRec is a 3-part webinar series that focuses on successful HR and IT cooperation for tech recruitment. Now, this idea was born out of numerous conversations with our customers, also from other online panels that we've done in the past. We seem to continually fall onto this topic of HR, IT cooperation for tech recruitment. So instead of just trying to answer them ad hoc as we go along, we thought let's dedicate an entire webinar series to it. So that's what we're doing today. Part 1 today will focus on the HR perspective. Obviously, we've just heard from our panelists. All three of our distinguished guests are recruiters and HR background. So we're going to start with this HR perspective. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing our second part, which is focusing on the IT perspective. So we're going to have developers, engineers, heads of IT team leads, these sorts of professionals. And then finally, we're going to do a combined panel in about a month's time where we have some people from HR and some people from IT, and we can let you guys battle it out and discuss it in this final panel. So during today's discussion, we're going to explore the different stages of the hiring process. So that starts at the very beginning from the advertisement description, all the way through interviewing, screening, sourcing, and finally, obviously, the offer and hire and even onboarding if we get time to cover that. So what I will do is try and stop this presentation. Bear with me, guys. So before we do get started in the discussion today, I've got a few polls. Like, the polls are here to design not only to make this session as interactive as possible, but you also want to tailor some of the content to you guys. So your responses are going to form some of the questions we have later on planned. And of course, we've got the Q&A session at the end. So if you've got any of your own questions, you can ask them to our panelists. But what I'll do is launch our first poll, which is a pretty straightforward one. I'm going to allow panelists to vote as well. And it should appear on your screen now. So the question is this: do you believe a poor relationship between HR and IT influences the quality of hire? And we've got 4 choices there by design. So we've got strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. Now, the reason we did 4 instead of 5 or 7, we don't want any fence sitters. So we want to be getting clear-cut answers here. I'm seeing some answers roll through, and I appreciate that, guys, for dropping those answers in there. Still a few more to go. One more. Okay. I'll end the poll and I'll share those results. So pretty clear cut. We've got a pretty strong winner here. Agree, 49% of the audience agreed, but we do have some votes for strongly disagree, disagree, and strongly agree. So what we'll do is jump right into our first question. So Trent, after looking at the poll, in your opinion, how important is a good relationship between HR and IT for tech recruitment? Can you maybe share some of your experiences throughout your career on this particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually, before I talk about being a recruiter, I'm actually going to talk about why I got into recruiting, because it relates, relates to the question. So as a hiring manager, the recruiter would send an email or call and say, hey, I have the perfect candidate. Great, put them on my calendar. At the end of the interview, it kind of made me wonder, like, what did they see that I was not seeing? It was like black and white, not anywhere qualified for the role. And I think that, a lot of it created this cantankerous relationship between the recruiter and me, to where I just went and did my own type of recruiting. So coming into recruiting, that was one of the first things that I focused on. I didn't know anything about HR. I didn't know anything about recruiting outside of how to do it as a hiring manager, but I did know what it was like to be on the other side of the phone. So I think, especially in tech, it's kind of a good golden rule in all of recruiting, but especially in tech, because things change so incredibly fast. I mean, I'm constantly going to one of our leaders and saying, okay, somebody said this, what does it mean? And having that kind of a relationship with them, I think it establishes some credibility, and it also kind of keeps both of you on a humble playing ground. And that's where I like to play. Helping. The other aspect of it is, and I think all of us have kind of been there, is you may have the from a tech perspective, perfectly qualified candidate, but then you're considering them for 3 different roles. If you have a good relationship with each one of your managers in each of those different 3 roles, and look at the candidate, you know that one is going to be a better fit for one particular team. And you're not going to know that if you're just, kind of being I call it the Wizard of Oz, kind of sitting behind the screen going, okay, qualified, and especially now, I think that managers want that. And the pandemic accelerated what should have been happening a long time ago, is that a lot of managers are looking at HR and especially recruiting. They want partners. They want counselors. And I think that if you don't take that opportunity and really maximize that relationship, then you're really missing out on a lot of job satisfaction and a lot of learning opportunity as well. That's one of the things I love about recruiting, is that I learned so much from my partners every day. It keeps it nice and new.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting that you make the point about the pandemic. It definitely seems like this particular topic has ramped up somewhat since then. Maybe people started to take notice of it, like more so after the pandemic occurred. So, Marsh, maybe do you have anything to extend on this point? What's your perspective of the whole?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming from a different perspective, where I've actually, and not to put down HR people, but some HR people have only done HR. They went to high school, they went to college, and they may not have worked in the line role functions on the front lines in sales, in marketing, and, technology development and things like that. So I think that's one thing that I bring to the table, is that I've actually been a salesman. I've been a chief marketing officer. I've launched, 4 software applications and been, president of a few software startups. So I think it's good to have that conversation so that HR understands, the technology and why it's important. And I think it's kind of a bit of a black box. So it's good for HR and the recruiter to really understand like what the role is, what they're looking for, what the day-to-day is, so they can also better sell it and explain it to the candidates. And it gives you more credibility as a recruiter or HR person to really understand what the role is, which can be difficult, but you really got to work on that, conversation, that explanation, between IT and HR.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks very much, guys, for your input there. I, as I said in the introduction, we're going to try to work our way through the hiring process. So this question is basically we're at the beginning point, Ludmila, when we're talking about the advertisement of the job description. So in your experience, how can you leverage your IT department to write the perfect job description for open tech roles? Do you have maybe any tips or advice you could share on this particular topic?
Or if I could also reflect right away to
Of course.
our wonderful, wise people on the call already, but I also agree
there's that word again. There's that word again.
I'm using my, not an accent, dialect here. No, but when we're talking about the HR and recruitment, I actually want to be a bit geek and nerdy, and maybe I like more the rename of it as a partnership, that I do highlight that it's HR recruiter. Yes, it's only a part of the function of what we do. And this partnership is actually also the best tip to create the best job description, because if you're coming with a background, with a copywriting, with a marketing, you can write whatever the best selling text. But if you're hiring for the engineering role, you really need these insights. You really need to understand what you're looking for. Your best partner is actually, whether it's a hiring manager or even go deeper, discuss with a team what the team dynamics, what the team is looking for, what team working with. So to my understanding, the job description has to be catchy. It has to be something that people read through, because sometimes when I read the job description, I'm lost in the first paragraph already. It's like, I don't know what they're looking for, something there. So it has to be catchy, but it also has to have this full information, who exactly you're looking for, what you're offering, what kind of team offering. Are you looking just a consultant? Are you looking in-house engineer? Are you looking specialist more on the broad spectrum, or you're looking for more specific knowledge or a task? As well, also being on the side of the recruitment, I understand that we tend to have the roles which is first in something and then everything that falls in, and then you leverage it between the teams and whatever it fits. But at the same time, I do advise everyone to cooperate with team and hiring manager and see the A/B testing, see which one works the best. You can always have one job, but you can see and twist the job description and then actually see what is your income from the pipeline. Whether it's a keywords, whether it's different resources where you posting the job description, whether it's different wording, or even make a competition, ask your engineering team to write the perfect job description that they would apply for. Because I think that's like when you're asking opinion from another side, you can always run on the A/B testing on your team first.
Yeah. It's an interesting concept, even like a marketing concept of the A/B testing, because as you said, having the same run-of-the-mill mundane job description, it's with particularly developers who've got ample opportunity, you kind of do need to stand out. It's an interesting takeaway for sure. I don't suppose Marshall or Trent, do you have anything to add, or can we move along?
I've just got one thing to add. I think it's brilliant though to have, like you said, to have the IT people describe like what's the kind of copywriting, what have we seen on the posts that got them excited, to apply maybe at other places. Like maybe there's some best practices. Another thing which I think we all overlook as recruiters is who are the internal current employees that actually are able to, get promoted or switch over. And I feel like in my years of experience, there's a lack of inventory of skills of internal people. Like when I was at Infinite Energy, I was an outbound commercial salesperson. Of course, there was like a recruiter job. There's some different tech jobs that I easily could have filled, like Scrum Master and all that, but they didn't know it. Even though they hired me, they had me pigeonhole this role, and they kept trying to get outside candidates there. And I was thinking, if you actually knew the talents of people that were in the company, you could actually promote from within. And my last employer before OSIA was Global Engineering. They were very, very good at, and it's one thing I would ask the hiring manager. I'd say, was there anybody on the team presently that you think could actually be promoted that role, who's already familiar, doesn't need all the ramp up and all the onboarding and all that? And actually, I'd say probably a third of the jobs, maybe 20% to a third of the jobs, we actually filled with internal employees, which then opened up another job to go outside. But still, it's nice to see that upward mobility and career progression for people who had staying power at the company.
Yeah, and having retention as part of my. It's not just bringing them in.
It's a whole nother.
How do we keep them? Marsh hits on something just is pretty paramount, because I've talked to a lot of TA leaders, and they're like, we get them in, and then HR loses them. And to me, that's a very binary way of looking at talent acquisition. So I don't look at like being a recruiter. I kind of go back to my banker days. I was an advisor. I had a portfolio, and I own that candidate from the time they say hello until I send them happy retirement. And I think that recruiters are missing an opportunity to step up and say, hey, we just hired John Smith or Jane Doe over in this other division. And I remember they had some of this skill set that you're looking for, highly trainable. They already know our culture. I think they'd be a great fit. So that's where recruiting's missing out. And I think organizations are missing out, tapping back into recruiting whenever they're looking at retention. So if you've got flight risk, bring your recruiter back in. I mean, we sell the company every day. Sometimes you need to resell the company to your employees to be able to retain them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we could have an entire separate discussion on retention and
I think that's exactly like this before pandemic, during pandemic. Once you're working on site, like if you work close to the engineering team, you're talking, who is the best listener is a recruiter. And usually you hear the talks, you hear there early enough. If someone is unhappy, then you can offer these inside roles, or you know that something's going to be open in another team, so you can always give the direction. And the pandemic side is also makes it more difficult, how to keep in touch with the team, how to know, how to be in the loop what's happening.
Yeah, but if it depends on how you use your CRM or your ATS. So if you tag your candidates, once they become, and part of this, don't even get me started about the ATS and all of that and the transition over to HRS. We're just going to bypass that. But in utopia, whenever you bring a candidate on and then you bring them into the company, into the HRS, all of that information comes over. You should be able to do a quick search. I need someone that's got React. Okay, cool, React. You know what? I hired someone 2 years ago. Let's talk about them. It's time for them to move into their next role. And I know that's something that at Hatchworks that we're really looking at, because we've done some analytics and looking at our retention. Every company I've ever been at, there's always this tipping point. 2 years, 4 years, you can break it down almost by job description. And I think that's the time that you bring your recruiters back in. If your tipping point's 24 months, bring them in at month 18 to have that conversation with that employee and resell, find out what skills they've picked up. I mean, if you think about it, you may have talked to them and they were finishing their degree. They may have finished their degree by the time that tipping point comes. Give them that opportunity, and then you're helping on the back end. And from a culture standpoint, nothing sells to junior talent like saying, I brought in Jane Doe 3 years ago. I've also helped her get 3 different promotions because she was just that good. You remind me a lot of Jane Doe. You've just moved to the top of the stack for that particular candidate.
That's awesome.
So bring us back to our webinar subject, having a great cooperation, IT and HR, because then it's partially a work of the manager to know when the people pick up their skills and they're moving to the next role.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a high school guidance counselor in a way. You meet with them as freshmen, and once they're out the door or whatever, but at least hopefully at an exit where you're all doing very well with options. But if you can be that guidance counselor to them every 6 months or whatever, that's very helpful. It's great advice, Trent.
And I think, Justin, too, it also it's how the recruiters position themselves, not just with the hiring managers, but also kind of what you tell yourself. So as a leader, I see myself as a coach, a mentor, and a counselor, like Marsh said. And if you think about your every course of the day, sometimes with a hiring manager, you're coaching them on how to interview better. You're mentoring them on, maybe not being so tough on everything in the job and hiring on competency and aptitude, not just on the technical skills. And then of course, there's counselors, whenever we have to listen to them about their bad day and everything. So yeah, it's just positioning yourself as that talent advisor. I think is going to help you be able to strengthen a relationship and then get that better job description.
Yeah, I really want to elaborate on that point about interviewing, but I did just want to touch on the topic of sourcing quickly if we've got time. I want to sort of keep things moving along, and I will launch a poll here in relation to sourcing because I don't want to sort of take over any stage of the process. So I got a second poll here, which should appear on your screen now. And that is, what is the involvement level of your IT department in sourcing candidates? We've got 4 options again: actively involved, partially involved, rarely involved, not involved. We're going to open up a much larger discussion about the mentoring and interviewing stages in the next component of this discussion. So we're going to come back to that, but I'd just like to touch on sourcing if we could first before we get there. And I can see some votes coming in. We got votes again across the board, which is interesting. More so in the actively involved than I actually would have assumed coming into this. So, okay, let's end the poll and share the results. So we do have a pretty close split between actively involved and partially involved, 36% and 31% respectively. But we do have some votes for not involved and rarely involved as well, which is not too unsurprising. So I might ask this question to you, Marsh. I'm not sure if you voted on the poll just then, but if you were to give some advice about convincing the IT department, like your IT department, to actively help HR in sourcing candidates, how could you go about doing that? What sort of tips or advice could you share here?
What I typically tell them is I'm, their talent acquisition partner, and that means I'm partnering with them to grow their team. If they don't have the team members that they need, then they're not going to hit their milestones, and that may affect, the investor tranches of investment down the line. I understand that everybody's busy, as we say, getting the wash it every day. Maybe sourcing isn't really that much of a priority for them, but I implement something at companies I work with, which is something you guys may want to write down. What I do is I'll go in my LinkedIn, and I have like 29,000 connections. What I do then is I'll do a quick search for like Java software engineer, and then I'll click search, and then I'll click on people. And then once I go in people, then I'll do filters. I'll say first degree connections, and then I'll say United States or whatever area you're hiring in, and then click apply. What that does is in the actual URL in the browser address bar, if you copy that address and you send it out to your employees in like a weekly or monthly email with like, here's our jobs we're recruiting for. Once they click on that hyperlink, it's going to automatically identify all of their first degree connections that at least on a broad basis may match the job. Okay. That's going to help them. Because when you tell employees like, okay, well, we're looking for employee referrals, but they may not know off the top of their head. It's a way that I give them that link to make it easier for them to go ahead and source and then talk, and encourage them to talk to the people and then get them to apply. So if you can make it more frictionless, that's easier for the employees. And we want to get people that have worked with our employees actually like. Those are our best candidates.
Yeah. And it seems a little less invasive as well, I guess, because these are people that they're already connected with as well. There's nothing worse than sort of cold fishing in different communities. That's the kind of worst. I
call it peer sourcing is my term for it.
Peer sourcing. Okay. No, it's really interesting. All right. If anyone has, Trent or Ludmilla, do you have anything that's worked for you guys in the past in this particular area?
No, I'm still trying to unpack that. Marshall, I might hit you up separately.
Okay. Yeah.
I have nothing to add. My brain.
I didn't see the pen. I wasn't sure if you got the notes down.
I wrote it down.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Good. Well, I'm glad. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Marshall. So thanks for that. Let's move along then. We did touch briefly on interviewing, but obviously before interviewing we have screening as well. That's obviously DevSkiller. That's what we do with Talent Score. We're a technical screening platform, so this is one of the areas that we hear most about, this particular cooperation between HR and IT. But Trent, if maybe you could sort of unpack this a little bit more. So starting off with sort of a twofold question. The first part being, what are the different screening and interview stages at your company? And then on the second level, maybe you can touch on the division of responsibilities between HR and IT at each stage. So, yeah.
All right. So let me reframe it though, that we're a startup. So I don't have this big HR, I call it monster.
Even across your career, or you research
the HR black box.
Yeah. I call it the HR monster. I mean, I did write a book that was the HR. What is it? The 7 Deadly Sins of HR. So I getting that one out friends, but so the recruiters go out. They do a pre-screen, and we are incorporating the Who template, kind of that really kind of digging into the candidate. So part of it is selling. Because we are a startup, we're doing nearshore and onshore. Not a lot of people know about us, so we have to do a lot of selling. We also kind of vet them and make sure that they meet the minimum qualifications, and then we do, like I said, the kind of that who of kind of walking through. Okay, why did you leave? What did you accomplish? To make sure that there's no trends, negative trends. We only want the good stuff. And then once they pass us, we send them over to the technical interviewer. And we work with our clients to be able to really kind of understand, okay, give us a grading scale. If you're looking for React, how would you grade, what would the score be for a junior versus a mid versus a principal or whatever the nomenclature is? We get those notes back, and then we meet with our CE team who's with the client and just kind of determine who are our best candidates. We may interview 10 and who are our top 5, because we do sprint recruiting. So we hit our whips and then we stop working on that role until we get feedback and move on to the next one. So that's how we kind of keep that process going. And then we submit it over to the client. And according to our sprint methodology, they have 48 hours to give us feedback once they actually have the interview. So we submit the resume, they have 48 hours. Once we book the interview, they have 48 hours to give us feedback. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, we're a startup, we have to move quick. Sometimes speed to market is the only thing that you have with a candidate. So we like to be able to tell our candidates, once I submit you in 48 hours, I'll know if this client wants you or not. And if they don't, I've got these other roles over here that I'm going to be working with you on as well. Or, we've got these internal projects that might be a better fit for you. So that's kind of the process. Where I am right now is I love AI. Mm-hmm. I love machine learning. I just read a book, The Future of Recruitment. I had to remember what it was, where it kind of gets into AI and the fault of the interview process. And it talks about how, you can use it to be able to very easily manage someone's competencies, measure how they rank against the job, but also give you some different insights, about the individual. I don't think that AI should be a pass-fail. Mm-hmm. I think it should be just an extra insight that is just a very objective view. And that's where we want to get to, is by the time the candidate gets to our client or gets to the project team that we're going to assign them to, that we're working on, we want to have almost as close to a 360 view of that candidate as possible, while we're also providing that 360 view to our candidate. I think that's going to help us on the retention. So a lot of work on kind of making sure that our interview process is fast, efficient, but it's also given everything that we need in a very objective way to be able to make a decision.
Yeah. It's by the sounds of things, like the approach in general is just, this word keeps creeping up in retention, and it seems like you're considering that very early on in the stage, which is really interesting. I don't suppose, thanks for that, Trent, but I don't suppose Ludmila or Marsh, maybe you'd like to touch on this with how this works at either of your companies.
Well, I can say that I had both experience with a Monster one, with a big company. We were not allowed to call it corporation, with having the coordinators and all the steps, and the steps are a lot of steps, the automatic testing, all the you can't move the candidate until the candidate completes the stage 1 ABC, 70% of that, etc., etc. But there also, I do personally believe that it's exactly the approach of the company, the different size, different needs. Now I'm also a part of the company, which is not a startup anymore, scale up, also moving more to the big business. And even within less a year, I could have seen, or I know the people who were pretty much joined the company because one of the co-founders called them and said, like, hey, do you want to join my cool project? And then we already having the processes right now where we have 4 stages, and each stage has an outcome that we're looking for, whether it's some home assignment, whether it's parallel programming. And I can still see that it's a live organism. It's like we're all the time working on that. We're all the time collecting feedback from our engineers. What do they think? How it went well with the candidates? How it went wrong? What we can do better? To some extent, it works when you have more stages. To some extent, it works when you have less stages. But I do agree that the speed is very important, especially nowadays. And that's probably my pain point once you get the bottlenecks, because I have seen exactly the same process can be run as fast as 2 weeks and as long as a couple of months. If something can be done within 2 weeks, but it's happening for 3-4 months, and something is wrong there and it needs to be fixed. And that's where partnership comes again, back to the game, where you need to find these pain points and figure out how to fix them.
Yeah. I think no matter the size of the company, unless you're the Googles or something of the world, speed's always going to be pivotal with the amount of talent that's available on the market. Like it's just
yeah. But Justin, I mean, I think back in the day, Google could take 25 days and it'd be
perhaps not now even. Yeah.
But now there's so many startups out there in the tech space that's doing some really wicked stuff.
For sure.
Google's kind of lost its allure. So, I mean, I think even the Googles and the Facebooks and all of them are having to really look and go, okay, we're not the ivory tower anymore. We're going to have to kind of get back to our startup roots and move quick and be able to identify the talent.
Yeah, certainly, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you see enough content about it on LinkedIn and stuff like that. People complaining about the process at Google and other big tech companies like that, for sure. What did you say, Ludmila? Couldn't be corporation, right? Company had to be the keeper there. Okay. Yeah. So moving along, we've kind of touched on the opening stages, where we've sort of gotten to interview and screening. One of the things I wanted to touch on is actually sort of dive a little bit deeper into screening. We talked about the technical interview and the different stages there. But this is one of the biggest things that we've heard from our customers, particularly before starting with us, and that was kind of the complaints of the IT team being involved and what their involvement should be at particular points. And screening was one of the biggest problems because it was taking up a lot of time taking away from their own projects. Can't sort of stay continual into it. It's the reason our CEO decided to start this company, because he was involved in too many recruitment processes that were just taking up all of his time. So I wanted, Marsh, if maybe you could extend on that point. It doesn't necessarily have to be only the negative feedback, but maybe some of the feedback that you do hear from in-house developers about the screening, interviewing, it, just the process in general. Like what do you hear? What have you heard across your career?
I've heard it all. Believe me. But I think it really depends on the culture that the CTO, espouses to the rest of the company, how much of a priority it is. I do think that screening up front is going to save a lot of time, because software developer time is very expensive. Taking them off, and if you're having to screen 30 different candidates and none of them are a match, you've basically lost 30 hours of productive time that they could have been coding on your product. Having upfront tech screening tools like DevSkiller I think is absolutely essential. I think it's a no-brainer to buy. And that's one way that we use a different third-party tool. What we do is we have all of our software intern and coming right out of college software engineers. They have to take this test, and then if they get 100%, then they can move on. Otherwise, we automatically reject them. For more senior people, what we do is if we don't know them, then we, after my interview, then a hiring manager interview, then we have them take the test, and see if they do well enough to continue on. In some departments, the hiring manager is the one to do it. In some department, it may be someone lower on the chain. Just kind of depends on the flow that they want, whatever works for them.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely, getting a tech screening tool is essential. We use Greenhouse, so for some of the more non-software engineering type roles, we have the hiring manager actually give us a list of more technical questions, along with what the right answer is. Like I was doing some screening for DevOps engineers, and what does DevOps mean to you, and things like that, and that was helpful for me to see, because I don't want to pass on someone that's a total joke onto my hiring manager, because I want to have credibility as well. I want to keep my job there. So, but yeah, that's kind of my take. Is it really comes depending on the culture the CTO pushes down onto the team.
Yeah, Yeah, I guess there's many ways to look at it. It depends on the size of the company, your pipeline, all sorts of different things. There's many factors that play into it. I did kind of have a follow-up question here about automation and AI, but I guess we kind of touched on that already, Trent, with your response, where it's kind of like a hybrid approach essentially, where you don't want to be relying on one too much. It's got to be kind of a multifaceted approach. So I think we can move along. And now basically we do have a couple of questions left and a couple of polls. I don't think I've seen any questions come in through the Q&A yet, but we will have time at the end. So if you do have any questions, guys, I encourage you to drop them in. We'll get to them. If we're not getting them, I guess we're doing pretty well covering the questions throughout the discussion already. So that's, kudos to us, guys. But I think I'll get to this next point here, which is where we're at the decision-making point. We've done all of the hard yards, like getting to the point where we're going to decide on a candidate. And Ludmila, I'd like to ask you this question about the decision-making process. Now, obviously, you can discuss where this responsibility lies, but I think more often than not, obviously, this is generally left for the hiring manager. But how can HR help in this process? How can they facilitate the process, in other words?
Well, to at least my experience of what I have seen, the positive side that being a part of the process, being able to present the candidate before the decision was made or before some final stages of interviews, when you can present the candidate to the team and to the hiring manager, who are they going to speak to, what the person is motivated for, why the person is coming. That already helps because what I see, there is still very often the mismatch that people say that this person is not good leadership. Well, the person never actually wanted to be a leadership. The person has been specifically telling that he wants to come and work somewhere, code in the corner, and no one touches the person. And then in a couple of years, people ask him, hey, you're underperforming because you're not mentoring. So I also feel that our role is exactly being this counselor and mentor. You're mentoring through the process and you're helping in a way to make decision. You're not making it biased. You're not telling that that person really needs a job. No, you're just giving the fact that this is a person. The person has this background. As I'm also working and hiring people worldwide, also as a native Russian speaker, sometimes I do have to ask other people to pay attention to the accents or to the languages, because I do expose to the many different languages and I do understand the Finnish accent, Russian accent, whatever other accent. Some other colleagues, they will just not simply be able to communicate to that candidate. So I do need to give an advice, the red flags, or where we could dive deep more, or for example, specifically ask the team what the outcome they're looking for, navigate them if the technical assessment has been completed or the person is more senior and we're actually expecting the person to show something on the call. Mm-hmm. But again, it really depends on the size and the timing you have, the capacity of the team you have, the capacity of the recruiter you have, and so on. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe Trent, you could extend upon that, because I guess it's not like the buck stops with the hire, like you've alluded to earlier on in your some of your earlier responses. So where do you see HR in this process?
Throughout the process, and one of the ways, and I think I started this 4 or 5 years ago, is part of the recruiter scorecard was a quick quit. So we looked at how many people quit in the first 90, 60, first 30, 90, and 180 days. And what we would do is, not necessarily, it would be a ding against the recruiter, but for me, it was a lead measure telling me, all right, we got to start looking at it. Maybe it's a recruiter. Are we digging in enough? Maybe it's a hiring manager. If we start seeing, a certain group that has just these quick quits, then I know it's either the recruiter or the manager, and I've got to fix it. Because if not, then it's just going to be that definition of insanity. And I think too that as a recruiter, I always, I have a little conversation that I have with a candidate that I feel pretty sure we're going to be moving to an offer, or maybe it's my top 3 out of the 5 that interviewed. I always have a prep conversation with them and tell them, look, I have an ethical responsibility to you because I reached out to you. You were minding your own business. I tried to convince you to come over to Hatchworks. Now you're interested. But I also have a fiduciary responsibility as an officer of my company to make sure that I do what is right for the company. What I want you focused on is this the right opportunity? And are we the right firm to be working for to further your career? That's all I want you working on. So I don't want you to say, all right, I want $165,000 base, so I'm going to ask for 180, knowing that they're going to back it down to 170. And I said, don't worry about all that. You tell me what you want, and then I'm going to go and negotiate on your behalf. And then whenever I go to the manager, I say, I've got the requirements from the candidate. What are the requirements? How would you price this talent? And whenever they say, well, what is the person making? I said, that is completely irrelevant. You're not answering the question. Let's talk about how would you price the talent if you bought it right off the shelf today? Mm-hmm. And then somewhere in between, I try to come up with something and make a recommendation, say, I think this is probably what's going to work. Mm-hmm. And I think positioning it that way a couple of times, and then that, in my experience, it always helps your acceptance rate, which further establishes credibility with your hiring managers. And whenever I first started doing it, I was a little tense about it, because I'm kind of telling the manager, I'm not telling you anything. You tell me what you want, and that can go one of two ways. But over time, it got to where whenever they interview the talent, they're like, "Hey, what do you think we should offer?" And I'm like, like 65. They're like, all right, write it up. There was none of this dilly-dallying back and forth. So it helps speed up that process. So I think positioning yourself, again, I'm going to keep coming back to that advisor for not just your candidates, but also for your hiring managers. It takes some of the stress off of them as well.
Yeah, and communication, by the sounds of things, it sounds like it's,
huge.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Marsh, we've got time. If do you have anything to add here, or should we move along? Move along. Okay. So guys, we do have 2 more polls, as I said. So I will launch our second to last poll. And this one is obviously a term that everybody's heard if they've worked in recruitment, and that's candidate experience. So the question here is, what is the single most important factor that influences a negative candidate experience? And the options we have to choose from are poor application process, negative interview experience, poor communication, untimely feedback, or slow process.
And we don't have like E, all the above.
No, that was the point. That was the point, because the next question is going to be, we can talk about them more, but I wanted to get a singular vote, obviously, because obviously all of these are, going to affect the candidate experience. But we're trying to get a singular winner if we can. And I can still see.
I had in the previous polls a question if it's possible to keep your own, or like involvement of the team, your wish.
Okay. Well, hopefully we're covering that today anyway. But I can see, and I think it's going to touch on what you've just said, Ludmila. So I'll share the results. They should be on your screen now. So again, obviously we got votes for everything, but just an out-and-out winner in poor communication with 46%. The next closest we had was slow process, 28%. Surprisingly, feedback, 7%, and poor application process, 7%, negative interview experience, 13%. So I will ask this next question to Marsh after having just seen the poll. What is the role of communication? Like, if we can talk about, you can actually touch on any of the ones that we said there in candidate experience, but particularly communication, because that's what our audience voted on. So why is it so important, communication, particularly for employer branding, actually?
I mean, it's actually not that difficult to give a good employee experience. I was on the job market myself for about a year, and literally I apply. It's like a blog. I get the standard email back saying, I'll thank you for your application. Then maybe a week later or so, I hear back, I'm sorry, we've picked more qualified candidates for this role and moving forward. And it's just, I understand how we do that with people that may not be qualified, but for the candidate experience, at least look at the resume, because I know I was one of the best qualified recruiters for these recruiter jobs in Boston tech startup companies. I don't know why I wasn't clicking with them, but eventually I did. So I think it's about communication. Once you speak with someone, keep up with, basically letting them know what's going on, keep building the love. We're excited to have you. Just really build that love with them, is what I call it. And so I do that a lot. I literally came across a candidate who, internally at Ocean, who had strongly agrees, yes, I'll hire him in Greenhouse, but no one had actually done anything to make an offer, So I sat down that day. I think it was like my 3rd day at work. And I said, okay, we got this. Like, let's do an offer. And I reached out to him, we'll make an offer. So okay, how do we make an offer? So I was able to get out and I talked to him. I peel back the onion layers, described how great the company is, all of our options, the fact that Oceant pays 100% of the employee's health insurance premium. We also have unlimited PTO. We talked about all the great people that have worked there and are coming to work there and our projected valuation when we IPO in 7 years. And I got him excited. I was able to get him to drop his ass down by $20,000. It's still $38,000 above our cap. But the great thing about our company is we are hiring the top 1% in the country. So we will pay the right amount of money to get someone on board. The other thing I do, which is different than most recruiters, I don't ask them, what salary range are you looking for? Because the company then comes at the lower range. What I do is I ask them, what salary would you, if I were to offer you a salary, what salary would you say yes to? Okay. That accomplishes two things. I know what I'm going to advocate for to get that candidate. Secondly, when I come back to them and I say, we're going to offer you $150,000. So, I really want 160, but then I can use that to say, okay, well, so you said you say yes to that. What's the objection? What's holding you back? And I can kind of peel back the onion layers to see what their objections are, and I can overcome the objections and get them to say yes to come on board.
Sure.
It's really about a lot of communications versus being a black box to external candidates.
Sure. And I mean, I wanted to sort of touch on from a wider perspective, maybe Trent or Ludmila, either of you want to answer this question. Looking at the options we had at the poll before, like, why is it so, like, where does it fall in the place of employer branding, in your opinion, these different sort of components that affect the candidate experience? Communication being one, feedback another. Like, have you seen it throughout your career or at your work where this has sort of impacted negatively on employer branding?
Ladies first.
Ladies first, okay.
Well, I personally, I'm for people over AI. AI is amazing. Machines are amazing, but we do give a people touch, and I'm always trying to establish this personal touch, and the communication is part of that. And I try to explain to the candidates, usually I'm a human being, and I'm here on your side as well. Please, if you have any questions, if I forgot something to describe for you, please ask. I'm here to answer all your questions. I'm here to make sure that you're ready for the next step. I'm here to make sure that you're actually coming to the next interview. Whether it's a pair programming, that your computer is working, that you're actually talking over computer, not over the cell phone. So that's exactly this candidate experiences about interview can go wrong. Anything can happen. We're all human beings. And it might happen that just something went wrong, but we can still help to change it just by the communicating it that, yes, that went wrong. We also appreciate your feedback. We will see how we can change, but this is the outcome, how we can use it for further steps. That's why I personally voted for the communication there.
Sure. Trent, do you have anything to add? Or?
Yeah, I do. I actually agree on the AI part of the process, like owning and engaging and all that. Is a nice to have. It should be an augmentation. It should not be what we lead with. Mm-hmm. For us, I guess it's kind of foreign to me. Like, why wouldn't I want to pick up the phone and call a candidate after their tech interview, see how it went, get their feedback, make sure they're still interested? Why, after they talk to the hiring manager, would I not want to call them, get their feedback? So I guess that's why I kind of struggle with it. To me, that's part of the job. That's what we should be doing. And even if it's bad news, it's kind of weird to be thanked for giving someone bad news, because at least there's some closure there, and if you do it the right way, it may not have been the right role for them then, but there may be a similar role down the road. And if you don't do it and you just, you ghost them, and then all of a sudden you just kind of show back up, and it's like, the candidate's like, I didn't swipe right on you. What happened? Where were you 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. So I think that, just having that very personal, and at the end of the day, it takes 5 or 10 minutes. We're not talking about an hour with the candidate after, they just sat through a tech interview. They don't want to talk to you for an hour, but just let them hear your voice, or ping them with an email and say, hey, I know you're busy. Thank you for taking the time. Did you want to try and catch up? Here's a link to my calendar. Let's just schedule 5 or 10 minutes. That's all it takes. That part can be automated.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting that you say it, like, why would you not do it? But maybe 18 months ago, we did a survey like to a few hundred developers, and we to craft an ebook essentially called the 10 Pitfalls of Technical Hiring. And what some of the things that were coming back, and from the votes that we got from developers themselves, those were the responses. So it seems like an obvious thing, but it unfortunately too often is the case that there's no communication, there's no feedback, it's a slow process, and it's just it's what we're trying to overcome for sure. I've seen that.
May I'm more fresh on the field here, so it has been very, very scary to start calling people and saying that they actually failed. And at the beginning, like 5 years back, I was taking each call very personally. I did have the candidates when I tried to call them, but they actually showed up face to face. And then you're trying to give them feedback, but trying to make it this, boyfriend, girlfriend, that it's not you, it's us. Very awkward moments. With time, of course, you're learning to find the right words. You're learning how to do it right. But for the beginning, it's really scary.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, there's obviously, two sides to the coin. But okay, I did see that a lot of the questions are being answered, but if there are still questions to come through, fire them in there, guys. But I'm going to launch this last poll, and then we'll just get some final comments from you guys, our panelists. And the question of the poll is here. It should appear on your screen now. Which stage of the hiring process do you believe requires the biggest improvement for better HR and IT cooperation at your company? And obviously, we've got the job advertisement description, sourcing, screening, interviewing, offer, feedback. We've tried to cover it all today during the discussion, and we want to hear you guys. Maybe
we have one more stage as the kickoff.
Kickoff.
The actual kickoff.
Yeah, well, there's kickoff, there's retention, there's obviously more than that's what's on here, but this is kind of what we covered today. And so this is why we wanted to maybe, after this discussion, see where you think your company lies during this point. But kickoff, of course, plays a part. Okay, I'm going to end the poll.
Should be its own hour-long webinar, like the rights and the wrongs, because it's like that old adage: if you go 5 degrees off in the first mile, you're okay, but by mile 10, you're way off your target, and it starts with that intake. So I agree.
For sure. But by the same token, retention and career paths itself as well as its completely its own story. Okay, I'm going to share the results. We did get a clear winner, but it was very even across the board. So interestingly, we had 28% vote for the job advertisement description. We also took votes for the interviewing. 23% was the close second. Sourcing and offer and feedback shared equal third place with 18%, and then we had screening with 15% to finish off with. So I'll stop sharing that one. I'm trying to think. Maybe I'll start with you, Marsh. Maybe we can leave some closing thoughts on the poll there. What do you think about trying to improve this particular stage? Can you give any last words of advice?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to like an ounce of prevention goes with a pound of cure. And I tell you what, I've gotten some job descriptions that were not what they were looking for, What we do, and I've done in a few companies, is there's a standard job description that we can just reuse over and over again. But I really want to get that honed down. I was working on a project manager job description at Ocean, talking to the hiring manager and saying, well, it was so generic, I wanted to clean it up a bit. So, like, what tools do we use? Is it Microsoft Project? Is it Trello? Or we use Jira Confluence. We kind of want to give an idea of what, actually just working with that IT manager, as Ludmilla and Trent have said, like, let's show them what's going to happen. I think the kickoff is so incredibly important. One part of the kickoff, like I mentioned before, is I asked them, are there any existing employees on your team that you think could develop, or we could move into this role instead? And that light just clicks on, and sometimes they don't think that way, but it definitely helps. So it really comes down to the kickoff. I think is the most important thing. Kick off and get the job description right the first time.
Yeah, for sure. Any last comments from you, Ludmilla or Trent, before we finish for today?
Yeah, I also like to play with a coach there at the kickoff session and actually ask questions what you're looking for, what you already have in the team, like mentioned already, and more like, okay, you're using these tools, but do you need anything add-ons? Do you need someone already coming particularly with these tools, or they can come and pick up what is a learning curve? Just more the how the team will be evolving, just progression, not like what we are hiring now and yesterday, but more what will you need in 3 months or 6 months? Because we all know that hiring, it takes at least 3-6 months, depends on the role and really depends what you're looking for. So more, we all need something yesterday, but what will you need in the time frame later?
Sure. And we don't have to touch only on the job description. It can be any of the ones there that you want to leave your final comments on for today.
Yeah, I think on the intake, definitely I agree with what both have said before, but I think you need to end it by setting the expectations. I think that's a miss. Here's how it's going to go. Because if you just kind of walk in and go, okay, I've got the job description, as a hiring manager, they're thinking, okay, in 3 days I'm going to have candidates. That's unrealistic. But it's actually the recruiter's fault for not setting that expectation. So I like to go in and say, okay, look, based off of this and based off some analytics that we do at the company, it's going to take us about 3 or 4 days just to kind of get them through our pre-screen process, and then we put them through the tech process. So today is Monday. I would probably say we'll have 2 to 3 sitting for your review as a flyby by next Monday. We hope to hit our whip by next Wednesday or Thursday, and then the ball is in your court. Now, just remember, Mr. and Mrs. Hiring Manager, you have 48 hours. So the sooner you get us feedback, the quicker that we can change our strategy, the quicker we can get the candidates in there, and the quicker we can move. Mm-hmm. So this is a partnership. Mm-hmm. If there is a violation, I will call you out on it. And if there is a violation, I expect you to call me out on it. So it levels that playing field. And then that way, it's just, it kind of gets back to what Marsh was saying about the whole offer of saying, what are you going to say yes to? And the candidate changes. It's the same thing with the hiring manager. It's like, all right, no. We agreed to this in the very beginning. Today is Thursday. I told you next Monday. Has something changed? Do I need to elevate this? Do we need to reprioritize this? So it kind of de-escalates some of the frantic that's going on whenever a position opens. So I would just say do everything that the both of them said, and then end it with setting the expectations and creating a timeline.
Okay, great. I know that we're getting really close to time, but we do have a couple of questions here in the open question Q&A. So I will just ask these, and maybe we can get like rapid fire responses if we can. The first one, which is probably the quickest response, which is from Martine. How often do you attend a candidate interview? Is the question, and I'll open that up to anybody. Trent, screen on you.
Which one of them? Like screening, first interview, every day?
Let's say how about technical interview? Because obviously it needs to be a little bit.
I do not.
I
don't attend.
I rarely, only if I want to know a bit more like insights, or if I want to have the feedback, or I know that like I have heard the feedback of the candidates that something went wrong, then I want to hear how the interviews actually happened.
Okay. Next question we have here is, do you think you need to have IT knowledge in order to be able to accurately look for candidates for a specific job? And it's a double part, is there any sourcing tool that will help you to be more accurate in terms of the skills that you are looking for? Ludmila, I saw you shaking your head there. You might want to go first.
Well, I think we always can get out with a topic. No, that's like a game partnership. It really depends what you need to find out. If you need someone to do the screening, which also screens the engineering task, then you might need the recruiter who has background in the engineering. If you need someone who actually just helps you source people, get this first assessment, talk to salaries, discuss communication skills, language, then you don't need that, because later on you will have the platform where you can check the tech skills. You will have the technical team which will check skills, because then if I'm an engineer who's recruiting, I will have very narrow view on what I will be able to recruit, because now I can recruit starting from cloud, Python, DevOps, whatever, you just name it, because I'm not expert in any of those, but I know the experts who can help me to find the needed skills or to explain the skills.
Sure. Okay. And one very last quick response here. We have
tools.
Tools. Oh, sorry. Tools.
We were talking about tools.
Tools. Yeah. Sorry. Tools.
Google X-ray. No. Anyone can suggest some tools?
Yeah, Google X-ray's great. We use Hire Easy because it kind of goes across different platforms and ranks them according to. I mean, you can. It's one of my favorite tools, especially in the tech space.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been using Amazing Hiring and now trying out Seek Out. I've heard some good things about GEM, like GEM.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I might get to this last question, then we'll wrap up. So we have repeating problems with candidates answering our ad who have too little skills for the role, but they still apply for it as they are tempted by salary brackets. Any advice?
That's just the way it's been for the past 15, 20 years, especially with everybody who's unemployed, who doesn't actually want to get a job. They're just going to apply to jobs that they know they're not going to get interviewed for. So, but they can say, hey, I applied for these jobs this week. Give me my $600 or $900, unemployment.
Sure.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
And then you get all the offshore consulting agencies saying, hey, we've got these 3 candidates that are ready to take your full-time job, So we got bombarded with those too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's one other comment here.
I actually had one conversation a couple of weeks ago when we had a candidate who asked quite much, but to our skill set, the candidate wasn't the perfect match, still a learning curve and everything. And we had a discussion that for us, it wouldn't be a senior. He's very senior, yes, but he wouldn't be senior for us. So this sport that he's aiming, we will be asking as from the senior. So if he wants to continue aiming that sport, he will be asked from that level.
Sure. There was one other comment here about DevSkiller and the way that they use the test. All of our customers use DevSkiller in different ways. Some people put it at the beginning of the process, the end of the process. That's the same with most processes. Like we've covered today, it's unique for every company and how you go about it. We're right on time, guys. We're actually 1 minute over time. So I would thank you very much, everybody, for your involvement in today's discussion, for your questions. A massive thank you to Ludmila, Marsh, and Trent. Thank you for your insights. I think it was really interesting today. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys in the future. Keep an eye out for those invitations. This part 2 and part 3 of this series. As I mentioned at the beginning, you'll also be getting that recording of the webinar probably on Monday. So keep an eye out for that one as well. So once again, thanks guys, and see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Guys.